Our scripture this morning is a continuation. The last couple of weeks we've been hearing of Jesus' Sermon on the Plain, it's called in the Gospel of Luke, and this is the continuation of this. So he's already done the woes and the blessings and those kind of things, telling you what to do. So Jesus says, "But I say to you who are willing to hear, love your enemies." We could just stop there, and we got our work cut out for us, right? But Jesus doesn't stop there. Jesus says, "Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. If someone slaps you on your cheek, offer the other one as well. If someone takes your coat, don't withhold your shirt either. Give to everyone who asks, and don't demand your things back from those who take them. Treat people in the same way that you want them to treat you. If you love those who love you, why should you be commended? Even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, why should you be commended? Even sinners do that. If you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, why should you be commended? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be paid back in full. Instead, love your enemies, do good, and lend expecting nothing in return. If you do, you will have great reward. You will be acting the way children of the Most High act, for he is kind to ungrateful and wicked people. Be compassionate, just as your Father is compassionate. Don't judge, and you won't be judged. Don't condemn, and you won't be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good portion, packed down, firmly shaken and overflowing, will fall into your lap. The good portion will determine the portion you give will determine the portion you receive in return. I sometimes don't like Jesus. I really don't, every now and then I'm like, why couldn't he just given us some nice, clear, simple, easy instructions to follow? This turning the other cheek business, the giving your cloak and your shirt stuff seems a little bit over the top sometimes. And I just feel so woefully inadequate on the daily. Why couldn't it just be go with the flow? Little Bob Marley, be happy. Don't worry. Is that Bob Marley? No, that wasn't Bob Marley. Was it Bob Marley? Bob Marley or the other, there's another guy. Robert McFerrin, or Bobby McFerrin, yeah. Don't worry, be happy. I had a nightgown with that on when I was sitting in the hospital for a long time. That wasn't the instructions he gave us, though. Those are the ones I could get behind. That would be fun. But you guys know I do love Jesus. And I do find the guidance that's given important. When I lay down at night, I do what's called a prayer of examine. I go through my day, my whole day, and offer it back up to God as the gift that it has been, and look at how have I been, what's happened in my life, how have I responded to what happens in my life. And I always want to see Jesus somewhere in that mix. I want to. Some days are honestly better than others. But day by day, the things add up. And well, our actions, if they're actions based on the instructions that Jesus gives us, they do truly make a difference. But we need to be reminded of Jesus' guidance because bottom line, love is not always our first response. Just the other day, I watched two little ones. They were building forts, one here and one there. And Randy came over to see Caleb's fort. And I don't know what he did, whether he touched it, breathed on it, looked at it, destroyed it. It was irrelevant because Caleb was irate, and he ran with that sense of determination that you all know right towards Randy's fort, and he was gonna do it. You know what he was gonna do, right? And I stopped him and I said, "What do you want to do?" He says, "I think he should taste his own medicine." Oh, I was like, well, How did Randy's action make you feel? Awful. Well, a little bit more conversation, and do you want Randy to feel awful? I just want him to taste his own medicine. Will that fix your fort? Will it fix the situation? He should taste his own medicine. He was entrenched in that one liner. It was emphatic. It took us minutes of conversation and a few deep breaths on his part and mine until the boys went back to their respective forts. Altercation avoided. The boys were 5. Already, without having watched anything of global news or world wars or anything like that, they had a sense, like an innate sense of retributive justice. If you did it to me, I'm going to do it to you, and maybe even just a little bit more. Because it feels good sometimes, right? How many of you have been there? Ooh, yeah, right? You don't have to raise your hand, right? And we're not 5, but sometimes it's like, oh, right? This is how wars start. Because I want him to taste his own medicine. But Jesus wants us to do unto others as we would have them do unto us. Shucks. That part's the hard part, right? I want people to be nice to me, but that other part is a little bit challenged. The struggle is real and it starts young. The situations between the boys, and in particular the statement about the medicine, made me wonder, why is it always in the negative? How many of you have experienced an amazing kindness, a small act of generosity, forgiveness, the help when you just needed it, and said, oh, I can't wait to give them a taste of their own medicine? Nobody, right? We never say it that way, but isn't that what we want? Isn't that what we want? To give the taste of that medicine back? That would look like Jesus when he guides us to love our enemies and to pray for our abusers. Now, mind you, Jesus never says you should stay in an abusive relationship. Never. The guidance is to not judge, to not condemn, to be kind and merciful and forgiving. And sometimes that needs to be done at a safe distance. I did need to keep Caleb and Randy separated for just enough time. Right? So there are times when confronting, even with the good medicine of God, is not the appropriate, safe, or good, healthy thing for us to do. We're still called to love, to keep our body and soul safe and well, but to love nevertheless. And it's hard work because that kind of medicine, the Jesus kind of medicine, is not what the world wants to deal out. It just isn't. Jesus guides us to always remember the nature of God in the things that he's telling us here. The nature of God is loving. The nature of God is forgiving. The nature of God is judgmentally unjudgmental. That's right. God does call us to account, but God is always gracious and kind and encourages us to seek justice for ourselves and for others. There are words, these are the kinds of words I think we need to hear right now in this time and place, when divisiveness seems to be the order of the day, when what makes us different from one another seems to be what matters the most, and there seems to be a lot of medicine being poured out from all directions. I don't know about you, but the uncertainty and rapid pace of change in our country for me is unsettling. It raises questions and concerns about how we choose to be a country. And from my point of view, which may very well be different than yours, we seem to be diminishing our capacity for good. And in some cases, the Christian faith is being used to justify restrictive and punitive actions. Not all of it, but some of it. We have been here before, my friends, as people of faith. We have been here before when a religious understanding of what is important has been co-opted to serve those in economic and political power. This is the exact situation which Jesus lived, where the Jewish authorities of the co-opted to being complicit with Rome, as long as their lifestyle was kept okay. In the biblical archaeological studies that we've done, both in Theology on Tap a number of years ago and in Bible study, one of the things that gets pointed out is there's a hill outside of above Jerusalem where the elite lived. The elite at the time of Jesus were either Roman or Jewish leaders. Okay, and in the Roman houses, there was tile, the decor. You know, I'd say like House Beautiful. If you looked at House Beautiful this year, the colors would be, I don't know, taupe and whatever, right? So the House Beautiful of the day, everything looked the same, except in the Jewish houses, they didn't have images of other gods. In the Roman homes, they would have Roman gods on display. The Jewish homes would look exactly the same, less that. The affluence looked the same. And the only way that happened was if the Jewish authorities at the top were co-workers with Rome. And when we know that when Jesus went up into Jerusalem at Holy Week, the road was filled with crosses, because Rome was sure going to keep those people in line so that no one objected to the way things were. We have been here before. And what was Jesus' response at that time? When the Jewish authorities had been co-opted, if you will, to love more boldly. He didn't ever stop loving, to care more concretely, to push and to strive and to live into ways that are more rather than less generous. He models for us how to pay attention to the plight of all people, when we would much rather, I don't know about you, but much rather put our heads in the sand and wait for somebody else to do the job, right? We're to love. And in so doing, offer welcome, as Jesus did, to each person that came to him. Each person, every single one, welcomed as an individual, whole and wonderfully made in the image of God. The refugee, the foreigner, the stranger, the poor, the queer, the lonely, the elderly, the parentless. He welcomed every single person fully for who they were. We're to say welcome in ways that matter. I had no idea, truly had no idea, that the card picked this morning would how do you say hello to God? I had no idea. Bob, you just picked it blind, right? But how do you say hello to God? God says hello to you for who you fully are, each and every time you encounter God. And Jesus did that over and over and over again. And we're to do that same thing, to welcome in ways that matter while doing the work, to dig in and wrestle with those dimensions of this welcome that may cause us discomfort or challenge. Not everybody on that list I gave, it's not an all-inclusive list by any means. Some of that makes some of us uncomfortable. Some of it doesn't. To wrestle with that. We're to work to see the individual as well as the systems within which we live, systems that can and do both good and evil, systems that are designed often to make us feel powerful, but true and good. Life-saving change has always, and maybe only ever, been done by a small group of people who continue to love despite everything. We've been here before, and if you don't believe me, I have a sermon to share with you. I was sitting in my living room the other day and looked on the shelf, and I have a table with pretty books. I don't know about anybody else. I read that House Beautiful book. It says, have a table, have your books on display. And so I got this one out. It's a pretty green book, gold letters, looks nice in my house, the right color scheme. And it's called Lent in London. I do not know where I got it. I don't know whether I picked it up at a resale shop because I liked the color and it would fit good and had to do with Lent. It's religious, it fits in my life, right? Or if it was perhaps a book that I inherited. That's a possibility as well. My great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather was a minister in England, finished his ministry in 1860, so 30 years before this, in London. And his son became a Sunday school teacher and was known 50 years after his death. His home was known as, that's where the Sunday school teacher lived. So it's possible this was Eustace's book, maybe not. But I started to look through it just for, well, for fun. Now, these are Lenten sermons that were given in downtown London in 1895. They were midweek services that the businessmen attended. So put that in your hat, right? We would think that that would just not even happen, right? But here in downtown London, they did. And so each, the sermons were, give different things. Our one aim that they gave to the ministers that preached is that matters about, it should be meaningless and complications of the vast social problems within which Christianity is called to handle. So they were to address social issues of the day. And each minister was free to say whatever they wanted to say. So Reverend Wakefield, in his sermon on patriotism, in Christian patriotism, which I thought was very interesting. Now also know that in England, church and state are one. There is no separation between church and state. These are all ministers of the Church of England, so they are part of that system in which they live. And he makes some interesting claims that I won't go into, but I will happily share the book if somebody would like to read it. But he taught without any, like now when we would read something in 1895, we would look at it and say, at that point, Britain was in its heyday. They were also avidly colonialist, pros and cons to colonialism. There was an enormous caste system class system within England, had its pros and cons. And so he speaks with none of that in his mind. He speaks as a pastor and as, therefore someone who is educated and probably somewhat. But he talks about the ardent desire that the people of England, where he lived, do the kind of loving that Jesus talks about as citizens of their nation. He feels this is imperative to the way they are. And he said, glorious opportunities are before Englishmen today. Our race is more influential than ever before in the history of the world. A new idea of life and duty has arisen, and there is a place for everyone to fill. Let us each, in God's name, do our part. And then, in the time not so far distant, we shall see our land not merely as the richest, but the brightest, the freest, and consequently the most Christian in the world. So long as there is one untended sickbed, one unrelieved poor person, one unavenged injustice, one preventable misery permitted, there is work for us to do. So the challenges that we have in this time and place for us, we have people of faith have been here before and undoubtedly will be here again. But Jesus, I just wish you had made it a little easier. We're to do that work. Just like in 1895, just like in times before, we're to seek to do love, to do justice, to honor and bless others the way God so freely blesses us each and every day. And we'll do this through the way we support the Lashuli family, walking side by side with them, the way we gather our change to make change for real for the women that are served by Cornerstone of Grace. We'll do it by the way we cook a meal and make sandwiches for those who have sought comfort and a real opportunity to change their lives through the work of the guest house. We'll do it as we tie blankets for children, and we'll work with one another to make the world a better place, one action at a time. Do unto others. as you would have them do unto you. And all along with this good work, we need to be really mindful of systems that are in place that make life easier for some and more difficult for others. Systems that we may not think about or evaluate, but the interlocking systems of education and economics. How does that work in our lives? How does systems of healthcare work for those who can afford it and those who can't? Are systems of justice always just for everyone? There's much work to do and much growth as we explore these complex and complicated issues of how we love one another as ourselves. So we can pray with our enemies and pray for them with an open heart to be kind, merciful, and generous and forgiving. So that I can say, and you can say, let's give them a taste of God's medicine. Let's just give them a taste of God's medicine and see what they do with that. Amen.